Okay, hi everybody. Here is my quick conversation about the Outrage Machine by Tobias Rose Stockwell. So we've already had a little bit of a look into some large data systems that collect data and use it for a variety of ways. And I think Rahman was mostly talking about governments and how governments use things, although she wasn't exclusive to that. This is something a little different. We're looking at industry. And ostensibly, if you look at the distinction between the two, government ostensibly, whether you believe it or not, its ultimate role is designed to serve people, right? It's the government of the people, whereas corporations are not. So say whatever you like about the effectiveness or lack thereof of government. At least in some cases, it's supposed to have your best interests at heart, whereas industry doesn't. It says it does, but it doesn't really. I mean, we saw that with ramen, the amount of information that it collects to suggest that it's giving you extra service. We're serving you personally. That's kind of the goal there. And in some ways, they kind of are, but not in a transparent way. And I think that's what Rhodes Stockwell is on about. So there are a number of things, the concepts here that he brings up that I think I'll talk about, and some of them are in the questions that I've posted to the Blackboard that you can look at, and I'm going to be asking that in class on the 26th, so we have 10 days before that happens. And one of them is the way that he describes the engagement escalator and what that is, right? So he says a couple of things that I find somewhat curious, and I'm not sure if I believe them, but certainly they're in some ways compelling. He's using a lot of behavioral psychology here to explain the way humans react with digital technology. And I'm sure most of you are on some kind of digital technology, whether it's Facebook. That's probably not many people are using that anymore, but Instagram and TikTok and things like that are still relatively popular. But he suggests that if you have sensational content, something that is somewhat controversial in some way, that is going to encourage people to click on it, right? And since Facebook and virtually any social media, its whole goal is to keep you on its site, to keep you cycling through that, in part because you are the product, right? One of the questions that was asked at the Senate hearing a number of years ago for Facebook and Zuckerberg. So one of the senators asked, "How, if you don't charge for service, how do you make money?" Which is sort of a shocking bit of ignorance from somebody, that it's ads, right? They're selling your information, and that's kind of the way things work. But Stockwell says there's a particular, that it's kind of human nature for us to be interested in sensational information. And so on page 72, I'll just read a short bit. Was this the result of it? And he talks about how he shows that graph on page 72 of how interest goes up the closer you get to this line of acceptable and unacceptable, and ends the chapter with an example of somebody who goes too far and hits some backlash. Was this a result of a nefarious plot or the consequence of deep algorithmic amplification? It didn't seem so. On social media, our attention naturally was edging towards the unacceptable and the outrageous, the extreme, all without external help. Put another way, no one ever say they want to see car crashes in their news feeds and violent content like this banned and against Facebook's policy. But if a video of a car crash is posted, you're likely to watch it, even for a moment. It's second nature to be attracted to sensational incidents. So he suggests that this is kind of a natural order of things. And I'm not sure I agree with it. It's an interesting concept, and certainly in certain cultures we can see that it's more influential than others. I'm thinking specifically of a guy called Donald Trump, who is very clearly a line stepper and very interested in pushing the boundaries in a number of reasons. To say something sensational and see if you can get out of it. Or use it as a tactic. A lot of people are saying his tough talk about tariffs and things right now are a strategy to kind of related to the Overton window, which I'll talk about in a second. And that rhetoric seemed to work in the United States. He won relatively handily in the previous election. However, when we look at what happened here, it's very different, right? We had a candidate who was styling himself in a lot of ways rhetorically and politically with somebody like Donald Trump, using kind of language that's not necessarily something you'd hear from a politician all the time. He's kind of pushing the edges that way, right? And we overwhelmingly rejected him. So he went from having a massive lead, where it was pretty much a foregone conclusion, it seemed, that he was going to win. And then within a month, that evaporated and he ended up losing and he lost his own seat. So it seems to me like genetically Canadians are not much different from Americans, but it seemed like we reacted to this sensationalism very differently. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts about that when we have class in 10 days or so. So a number of the things that, or one of the things that he discusses here is the trigger chain, right? And I think we've all seen this. I'm not on any social media. I'm on YouTube. I guess that's a social media. But I post that mostly, I got into that. I was in its early stages, but then stopped using it until COVID. And then it seemed like I needed to have a platform to send videos to. But the trigger chain is an important thing. Somebody will say something that's slightly offensive, right? Or pushing the line. That's what he calls line steppers, getting really close to the place where the information, whatever you post goes beyond what people are willing to consume. And you want to get close to that. So something that's sensational, and then more people will pay attention to it. And so you post something and somebody's outraged by it. They respond to it. And then somebody is outraged to the outrage. And then it keeps going up until eventually there's a major news story. At least that's what the graph on 74 says. The ranking algorithm up levels things so that it has a better chance of showing up in your news feeds. I'm not sure how much people, especially people of younger generations, millennials and younger, get their media from major news sources anymore. It seems like most people are getting a feed from Facebook or something like that. That's where they get their news from, instead of going to the New York Times or the Globe and Mail. So that's the trigger chain. And that's the way that, in part, Facebook, we get a couple of moments where Facebook's kind of hammered here. The way that they use that to manipulate people to get more people involved. One of the things as they discover is there's a thing called moral contagion. And that is that people who are in the same kinds of communities tend to think the same way and share the kind of emotional responses that people have of various news stories. So that's one of the major dangerous things about the way that we see media used today, is that if you're just going to Fox News, and I will admit I go to Fox News, but I also go to the New York Times and to CBC to get a more rounded version, and BBC as well, British Broadcasting. So I do take a look at what's going on Fox News, but I make sure that I get a diversity of opinion, or try to anyways. But yeah, and so that moral contagion helps with this, right? Because it creates communities that have this kind of insular way, like an echo chamber, where they're all following the same sort of point of view. So one of the things that Overton is talking about is the way manipulation works, and what Facebook did 10 years ago or so in trying to understand how their platform actually worked. And they either upweighted or downweighted certain content, right? So and that means it's more likely to show up in your news feed or in a search if it's upweighted. Right, so the person who initially did this, or started this, I suppose, or this trend, was a guy who worked for YouTube, and basically he created an algorithm that followed your history and then predicted what that would mean for you. So I think most people know this, that if I, was Googling Black Lives Matter, and in my search history I have Mila Milosevic, I can't remember anybody's name, Donald Trump, and I can't remember his name now, the guy that wrote 12 rules, 10 rules for life, right? Versus if I went to Gloria Steinem, Tracy McMillan Cotton, right? Those kind of left-wing people. What I would get with Black Lives Matter would be very different, right? So if I was, and so the feed that YouTube started was if you were searching for some whatever, a sports team, right? The New York Giants. The rest of your feed would be showing you other things about the New York Giants that you might want, or football generally. Now that's a pretty innocuous thing. Like I don't think football has ever created polarized points of view. Maybe it has, but what they did was they upweighted or downweighted certain content to see the way people would react. And this was done without the consent of anybody who's using Facebook. So basically, they were trying to see, can we, if we send certain images to people or connect people with certain groups, understand the way they will emotionally react to it? And the answer is yes, you can. At one point, even showing images of a feed affects the way that you think about that issue and emotionally respond to it. All of that's pretty powerful stuff. That's one thing that Zuckerberg a number of years ago apologized for in Congress. And there are other things as well. And one thing that's interesting about this, Stockwell keeps mentioning the policies of Facebook, but I think it was in January, it's not that long ago, that Facebook dropped its content moderation and said that people will self-police, which is a little funny. And I think he's arguing that he's doing this for free speech, which is a reasonable argument, but he's really doing it to get people to stay on the system. Whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever, he wants people to keep using his service. So another concept that you probably have heard of is the Overton window, and the diagrams are on page 78 and 79 of that. Fairly simple diagram. And again, it's playing with a lot of the similar concepts that I've just talked about. We have something that's outrageous, right? That we know people are going to reject right away. So we're not going to say that, but we'll find that line stepper and make it as far as we can, and then find out what the response will be. And basically, so the idea, he says, he used gun control, which is a big issue in the United States. That you say everybody should be able to have a tank, right? That's probably too much. A submachine gun. Everybody should be able to own an automatic weapon. Then basically the response to that, because you're asking for something so outrageous, that maybe they'll consent. They'll settle for having handguns for everybody, right? So you don't really want the most extreme thing, but you use it as a bargaining tool to get what you want. So the way that Facebook had upweighted and downweighted certain kinds of information was trying to get people to be more extreme, right? To get people to a place where there really is no way for us to be conciliatory to each other. And I think a lot of us can see on social media and media generally that that's kind of happening, right? Increasingly, we have a polarized, what I guess we would, in a fairly basic way, call left-wing and right-wing politics. And they're increasingly unable to understand each other, which, when I was growing up wasn't the case. There was a lot of bipartisan, as they call it, interaction between parties, both in the United States and Canada, where that really doesn't happen much anymore. And I think it's probably because of the polarization of the two positions. Mitch McConnell, who was the Senate leader for years with Barack Obama, said that his proudest achievement was blocking everything that Barack Obama proposed. So any legislation, he had to do it in executive order if he wanted something passed, was killed in the Senate. And that's really not paying attention to what the substance of the proposals are, but rather just de facto fighting somebody, right? And that's kind of what he's on about here. So one other thing that I'll mention here just quickly is, where is it here? I'm tempted to downweight certain content. That's not what I was looking at. All right, well, I can't remember. I have to bring it up in class. So one of the last things that he does is talk about this guy, Logan Paul. And this is an example of somebody who goes too far, right? Where he has and it goes into what they call, I guess, the suicide forest, right? And finds a person who had recently killed himself by hanging, and he posted that. That gets kind of rejected pretty quickly. And I think there are certain circumstances where that rejection does happen, but I wonder how you think of it. Most of you, I'm sure, are on social media, and most of you would have significant profiles on that. And I'd be interested to see if you think that this is actually happening. As I said, I'm not on anything, so I don't have Facebook, Instagram, or anything like that, so I don't really know how all that actually works. I have some idea because of reading about it, but it's a fairly pedantic understanding of what social media is. But I wonder what you think about that, like how the polarization through the various manipulations and strategies of internet technologies, social media technologies, all designed to keep you engaged. It's basically designed to piss you off. Its goal is to either offend you or make you angry or whatever. And when I was on Facebook for a while, and when I was on my way out with that, I'd kind of had enough of it. It was about listening to discussions that people were having on various Facebook forums, which seemed to me to achieve nothing. Like there was really no serious discussion happening there, no sense of compromise, no understanding the other person's point of view, really. It's just sort of like baiting each other and being socially or internet silly. So that was the kind of the final straw for me. And again, this is more than 10 years ago, so my experience with social media is fairly limited. And I've never been on. Well, I was on WhatsApp when I was in London because I needed something to. Is that social media? That's just a phone line. Anyways, because I needed something that wasn't going to pay thousands of dollars to use the phone. All right. Well, those are some thoughts about Tobias Rose Stockwell. I'd be interested in seeing and hearing how you feel his analysis is, whether you think he's true. You've heard that I have some suspicions about it, but certainly there's some discussion to be had there. And I'll probably be sending out something asking you to write a little something for me before the class starts. Okay.